In the dusty reaches of New Mexico, where the desert meets the sky and legends are born from silence, a lone cowboy made a discovery that would shake the foundations of two worlds. When ranch hand Jake Morrison found his alien housekeeper collapsed in his barn, bleeding a strange silver liquid that seemed to shimmer with its own light, he faced an impossible choice. The alien authorities were already on their way, their ships cutting through the atmosphere like knives through silk. What happened next would challenge everything we think we know about loyalty, courage, and the invisible lines that divide us. This is the story of a man who refused to look away when it mattered most, and an injured being whose fate rested in his calloused hands. In the next hour, you'll witness a tale of interstellar politics, forbidden compassion, and a decision that would echo across galaxies. Buckle up, because this story begins where most would end, in a moment of desperate humanity. The morning sun hadn't yet broken over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains when Jake Morrison pushed open the barn doors of his modest ranch outside Santa Fe. The hinges groaned to their familiar complaint, and dust motes danced in the dim light, filtering through gaps in the wooden slats. Jake had inherited this land from his grandfather, along with a philosophy as simple as it was rare in modern times. Take care of your own, and don't ask questions that don't need answering. For 3 years, that philosophy had extended to Lyra, the alien domestic worker assigned to his property under the integration program. She wasn't like the humans who'd come and gone from his life. She was efficient, quiet, and asked for nothing beyond her modest quarters in the converted stable. Her species, the Meridians, had arrived on Earth 15 years ago, not as invaders but as refugees from a dying world. The treaty that followed had been simple. They could stay, work, and live among humans, but they answered to their own law, enforced by the alien sheriff's office, a parallel justice system that humans were forbidden from interfering with. Jake had never given it much thought until that morning. The smell hit him first metallic and sweet, like copper mixed with jasmine. His boots crunched on the hay-strewn floor as he moved deeper into the barn, past the empty stalls where his 2 remaining horses nickered nervously. Then he saw her. Lyra was crumpled against the far wall, her usual pristine appearance shattered. Her work uniform was torn, revealing the pale blue luminescence of her skin, marred now by deep gashes that wept silver blood. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, and her large amber eyes widened when she saw him. Terror flooded her features, not fear of dying, Jake realized, but fear of being found. She tried to speak, her voice barely a whisper in the universal translator embedded in her throat. The device crackled, damaged. Please, ... Don single quotes, T ... report, ... double quotes. The words dissolved into static. Jake's mind raced. Under the treaty, finding an injured alien and failing to report it to the sheriff's office was a federal crime. The aliens policed their own, and humans had no right to intervene, no matter the circumstances. The penalty for interference was severe years in prison, forfeiture of property, permanent exile from any alien-habited zones. But as Jake knelt beside Lyra, those legal consequences seemed abstract and distant. Up close, he could see the pattern of her wounds, not the random tears of an accident, but deliberate, parallel cuts, as if made by claws or blades. Someone had done this to her. Someone had hurt this being who had cleaned his home, prepared his meals, and never asked for anything in return. Through the broken translator, Lyra managed one more word. This one crystal clear. Sheriff. Her hand trembled as she pointed upward, toward the sky. Jake stepped outside and looked up. 3 points of light were descending through the morning sky, moving with the precise formation of the sheriff's patrol ships. They would be here in minutes, maybe less. Every fiber of common sense told Jake to step back, to call them in, to let alien law handle alien business. But when he looked back at Lyra, saw her trying to drag herself deeper into the shadows despite her injuries, He understood something that the treaty's bureaucratic language had never addressed. Fear was universal, and so was the instinct to protect someone who needed help. Jake Morrison had spent 43 years on this planet being a man of his word, following the rules, keeping his head down. But in that moment, watching Lyra's silver blood pool on his bond floor while alien law enforcement descended from the sky, he made a decision that would change everything. He would not let them take her, not until he understood why she was so terrified of those who were supposed to protect her. Jake's hands moved with the efficiency born from years of treating injured horses and cattle. He scooped Lyra into his arms. She weighed less than he expected, her alien physiology different from human bone and muscle, and carried her toward the house. She struggled weakly, trying to protest, but her damaged translator could only produce fragments. ... Can't. They'll know ... Sensors ... That word stopped Jake cold. Sensors. Of course the sheriff's ships would have bioscanners able to detect meridian life signs from the air. Changing course, he veered toward the old storm cellar, a relic from his grandfather's time, built during the Cold War when nuclear annihilation seemed inevitable. The heavy metal door was concealed beneath a wooden platform near the well. Jake had to set Lyra down to wrench it open, Russ protesting against his strength. The cellar below was dark and smelled of earth and old preserves, but it was lined with lead and steel, designed to shield against radiation. Maybe, just maybe, it would block their sensors too. He carried Lyra down the narrow stairs, laying her on the old cot his grandfather had kept stocked for emergencies. In the weak light from his phone, he could see her wounds more clearly. The cuts were deep, deliberate, and there were burn marks around them, marks that glowed faintly with residual energy. Torture marks. The realization hit Jake like a physical blow. Someone hadn't just hurt Lyra, they had tortured her. Above them, the whine of alien engines grew louder, accompanied by the distinctive bass drum that vibrated through the ground. Jake climbed back up, closed the cellar door, and was dragging the wooden platform back over it when the Sheriff S transport settled onto his property with a whirlwind of dust and debris. 3 figures emerged from the craft. The lead officer was tall, even by Meridian standards, his skin a deeper blue than Lyra's, almost cobalt in the morning light. His uniform was adorned with symbols Jake didn't recognize, but the weapon at his hip was unmistakable, a pulse rifle, standard issue for the sheriff's office. His 2 deputies flanked him, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. The lead officer's translator hummed to life with perfect clarity. Human Jake Morrison. I am Sheriff Cale. We are tracking a fugitive, a domestic worker, designated Lyra 743. Our sensors indicate she was in this vicinity 3.7 hours ago. Have you seen her? Jake kept his face neutral, his posture relaxed despite his hammering heart. 43 years of poker games and livestock negotiations had taught him how to lie. Haven't seen her since yesterday evening. She finished her duties and went to her quarters, like always. I've been in the house since sundown. What's this about? Cale's amber eyes narrowed. Unlike Lyra's, which held warmth, his were cold, calculating. That is alien business, human? You are required only to report her location if you have information. One of the deputies moved toward the barn, scanner in hand. Jake forced himself to remain still, to not look toward the cellar. The deputy disappeared inside while Cale studied Jake with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Lyra 743 has violated code. She must be returned to our custody for processing. If you are found to be harboring her, the consequences will be severe for you both. The way Cale said, processing made Jake's blood run cold. It wasn't the word choice. It was the tone, clinical, and detached, as if Lyra were a malfunctioning appliance rather than a living being. The deputy emerged from the barn, shaking his head. No life signs, Sheriff. Blood traces detected, but the trail goes cold at the door. Possibility she entered a vehicle. Cale's gaze never left Jake. Do you own a vehicle, Mr. Morrison? Truck's in the garage. Want to search it? Jake gestured toward the detached garage. It was a calculated risk, but showing cooperation might deflect suspicion. Cale nodded to his deputy, who moved to search the garage. The sheriff took a step closer to Jake, close enough that Jake could see the intricate patterns in his skin, like circuitry beneath the surface. Humans sometimes develop inappropriate attachments to domestic workers. They forget that we are not your equals under the integration treaty. We are guests, subjects of our own law. Any interference is not compassion. It is colonialism. The words were clearly rehearsed, part of official doctrine, but they revealed something important. This wasn't the first time a human had tried to help a fugitive Meridian. The deputy returned, shaking his head again. Cale's jaw tightened, the first sign of frustration. We will expand our search perimeter. If you see Lyra 743, you are legally obligated to report immediately. Failure to do so carries a minimum sentence of 8 years in federal detention. With that, the 3 officers returned to their craft. The engines flared to life, and the transport lifted off, banking toward the east. Jake watched until it disappeared over the mountains, then waited another 5 minutes, counting his heartbeats before he dared to move. When he opened the cellar door, Lyra was unconscious, her silver blood seeping into the old cot. But she was alive and hidden. And Jake had just committed a federal crime for a being whose name he de-learned only 3 months ago, when he bothered to ask. Jake worked through the afternoon with supplies scavenged from his medical kit and the internet's dubious wisdom. Meridian physiology was technically classified information, kept secret by the alien authorities. But enough had leaked over the years that Jake found what he needed on conspiracy forums and sympathizer websites. The silver blood was copper-based, not iron like human blood. The wounds needed pressure and a specific chemical compound that could be approximated with hydrogen peroxide and baking soda. It was crude, but it worked. By evening, Lyra's bleeding had stopped, though she remained unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. Jake brought down blankets, water, and food he hoped she could eat. He was hauling in a battery-powered heater when his phone rang. The name on the screen made his stomach drop. Federal Integration Office. He answered, keeping his voice level. Jake Morrison. Mr. Morrison, this is Agent Sarah Chun with the Integration Compliance Division. I'm calling regarding an incident at your property this morning. The Alien Sheriff's Office has filed a report indicating they conducted a search related to a fugitive domestic worker. I need to verify some information. Jake climbed out of the cellar, closing the door behind him. Sure. What do you need? The worker assigned to your property, Lyra 743, was last confirmed at your location 48 hours ago. Sheriff Cale indicates she may have fled the scene of a crime. Have you had any contact with her since their visit? The way Chun phrased it was interesting. Scene of a crime suggested Lyra was a suspect, not a victim. Jake chose his words carefully. I haven't seen her since yesterday evening. She completed her duties and went to her quarters. When I checked this morning after the sheriff left, her room was empty. Some of her personal items were gone. It was a calculated addition. If Lyra had fled, she would have taken belongings. Chun was quiet for a moment, the sound of typing filtering through the phone. Mr. Morrison, I need to be frank with you. We've had concerns about the alien sheriff's office in your region. Several domestic workers have disappeared under similar circumstances over the past 18 months. Each time the SO claims they were fugitives or violated codes. But we've never recovered bodies, never seen trial records. It's possible something else is happening. Jake's grip tightened on the phone. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything officially. But if you do see Lyra 743, consider contacting us instead of the ASO. There are protocols for requesting human jurisdiction in cases where we suspect alien law enforcement may be compromised. We can't override the treaty, but we can observe and document. Chun's voice dropped lower. Between you and me, Mr. Morrison, Sheriff Cale has been operating in your area for 3 years. And in that time, 14 domestic workers have been declared fugitives. 14. None found. None tried. None returned to their families. I don't believe in coincidences. The line went dead before Jake could respond. He stared at his phone, mind reeling. 14. 14 meridians gone. Was Lyra supposed to be number 15? He climbed back down into the cellar. Lyra was awake, watching him with those amber eyes, still clouded with pain but alert. Her translator crackled to life, stronger now. You ... Should have let them take me. You don't understand what you've done. Jake pulled up an old chair, sitting so he was eye level with her. Then help me understand. What code did you violate? What crime did you commit? Lyra's hand moved to her side, where the worst of the wounds had been. No crime. I saw something. 2 months ago, I was cleaning the community center in Santa Fe late at night. I saw Sheriff Cale and his deputies with another worker, someone I knew from processing when we first arrived. They were taking her somewhere. She was unconscious, restrained. I hid, but Cale saw me. He said if I spoke of it, I would disappear too. Her voice shook. Last night, they came for me. They said my silence was a violation of loyalty codes, that I should have reported the illegal feelings I developed by questioning his authority. They hurt me to ensure I understood. But I escaped through a ventilation shaft. I ran here because you always treated me like I mattered. Jake felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. The others, the 14 workers who disappeared. What happened to them? Lyra's eyes met his, and in them, Jake saw a truth more horrifying than he'd imagined. There is a facility in the mountains. Sheriff Cale calls it the reclamation. Workers who see too much, who question, who develop too much personality, they're taken there. I don't know what happens inside, but those who enter never leave. And the treaty prevents humans from investigating alien facilities. The enormity of it crashed over Jake. A systematic disappearance program, hidden behind the treaty's protection of alien sovereignty. Cale wasn't enforcing Meridian law. He was operating a death camp, and the treaty made him untouchable. Jake stood, pacing the small cellar. The integration office agent Chun, she suspects something. She told me to contact them if I found you. Lyra shook her head frantically. No. If they take me into custody for questioning, the treaty requires them to transfer me to the SO afterward. Cale will claim jurisdiction, and I'll vanish like the others. The only way I survive is if I disappear so completely that even the sensors can't find me. How? Jake asked. How do we do that? Lyra's hand moved to the translator at her throat. This device is also a tracking beacon. It reports my location every 6 hours to SO headquarters. The next transmission is in 3 hours. If they receive my signal from this location after you denied seeing me, you'll be arrested and I'll be taken. Jake understood immediately. We have to remove it. Yes, Lyra whispered. But the procedure is dangerous. The translator is woven into my neural tissue. Removing it could kill me. And even if I survive, I'll never be able to speak your language again. I'll be mute to humans, forever voiceless. The choice hung between them in the dusty cellar air. Jake thought of 14 disappeared Meridians, of a sheriff who operated a killing facility with impunity, of a being who had cleaned his home and trusted him enough to run here when death came for her. Show me how to do it, Jake said. We're taking that translator out. The next 2 hours were the longest of Jake's life. Using instructions, Lyra managed to convey through a combination of gestures and crude drawings. Jake sterilized his smallest knife over his camping stove. The translator device sat at the base of her throat, a small circular node that glowed faintly beneath her skin. According to Lyra's drawings, it connected to neural pathways that ran up into her brain stem. One wrong cut could sever something vital. Jake's hands had been steady enough to stitch up a horse's flank or pull a calf from a difficult birth, but they trembled now as he positioned the blade. Lyra lay back on the cot, her eyes fixed on his face. She reached up and placed her hand over his, the coolness of her skin a shock against his calloused palm. She couldn't speak. They'd agreed to save her strength, but her eyes said everything. Trust. Jake made the first incision. Silver blood welled immediately, and Lyra's body went rigid, her back arching off the cot. But she didn't cry out. Jake worked with agonizing slowness, following the drawings, cutting around the translator's housing. The device was about the size of a quarter, embedded deeper than he'd expected. Filaments extended from it like roots, pale threads that pulsed with faint light. Those were the neural connections. They had to be severed carefully, one at a time. Each cut made Lyra convulse, her hand gripping Jake's forearm with surprising strength. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cellar's chill. His shirt was soaked through. After 40 minutes that felt like hours, the last connection parted. Jake used his fingers to work the translator free, and it came out with a wet sound that made his stomach turn. The device lay in his palm, still glowing, still transmitting. He had less than an hour before its next signal. Lyra was breathing hard, her hand pressed to the wound as silver blood seeped between her fingers. Jake applied pressure with clean cloth, holding it firm while he used his other hand to prepare the makeshift cauterizing iron, a metal rod, heated over the camping stove. This was going to hurt. He looked at Lyra, and she nodded, steeling herself. The cauterization took 3 applications. The smell of burning flesh filled the cellar, alien but not so different from Earth biology that Jake's mind didn't recognize it as the smell of agony. When it was done, Lyra had passed out again, her face pale even against her blue skin. Jake wrapped the wound as best he could, then turned his attention to the translator. He had 40 minutes. He climbed out of the cellar, the device clutched in his hand, and walked to his truck. His original plan had been to destroy it, but an idea had formed during the surgery, risky but potentially brilliant. He drove out to the highway, the translator on the passenger seat beside him, its glow fading now that it was separated from Lyra's neural energy. On the highway, he spotted what he was looking for, a long-haul truck heading east. Jake pulled alongside it at a red light, rolled down his window, and in a move that would have made his high school quarterback coach proud, tossed the translator into the truck's open cargo bed. The light turned green, and the truck rumbled off, carrying the translator toward Texas, broadcasting Lyra's signal from hundreds of miles away. It wasn't perfect. Cale would eventually realize something was wrong, but it bought them time. When Jake returned to the ranch, dawn was breaking. He found Lyra awake, sitting up despite her obvious pain. She tried to speak, but only a soft clicking sound emerged from her throat. Tears streamed down her face, not from pain, Jake realized, but from loss. She had traded her voice for her life. Jake sat beside her and, without thinking, took her hand. "We're going to figure this out," he said, knowing she couldn't respond but hoping she understood. "There has to be someone who can help us. Someone who can stop Cale." Lyra pulled her hand from his and reached for the pad and pencil Jake had brought down. Her writing was shaky but legible. "Others, more workers who suspect. Secret network. We need to find them. Only way to expose Cale is evidence." Many voices. Jake read the words twice. A network of alien domestic workers operating under the noses of the ASO, gathering evidence of corruption. It makes sense. Who else would notice the disappearances, the patterns, the fear? But finding them would mean leaving the safety of the ranch, venturing into areas where Cale's deputies patrolled regularly. It would mean risking everything. Lyra was watching him, her amber eyes filled with hope and desperation. She wrote again, "Will you help us, all of us?" Jake thought about his quiet life, his simple routines, the safe distance he'd always kept from trouble. Then he thought about 14 missing meridians, about Lyra's wounds, about a system designed to protect becoming a mechanism for oppression. He thought about his grandfather, who'd built the storm cellar to protect his family from threats that never came, and wondered what the old man would have done in this situation. Actually, he didn't have to wonder. His grandfather had hidden Jewish refugees during a time when few would, had risked everything for strangers because it was right. The answer was in Jake's blood, in the values that had shaped him even when he thought he was just keeping his head down. "Yeah," Jake said, squeezing Lyra's hand. "I'll help. All of you." Lyra's face transformed with relief and determination. She picked up the pencil again. "Then we start tomorrow. Tonight, you need to report to Agent Chung that I was here but escaped. Give her the truth, but not where I am. Make her think you're cooperating. We need Defio watching Kale while we gather proof." Jake nodded slowly. It was smart having the federal government aware of the situation, gave them a layer of protection, even if the treaty limited what Chun could do directly. But it also meant lying to a federal agent, adding another charge to the growing list of crimes Jake was committing. He climbed the stairs and made the call. Agent Chun answered on the second ring. Jake told her everything: the blood in the barn, the injuries, Lyra's appearance and disappearance. He described the translator removal, watching it happen, unable to stop her before she fled into the desert. He gave enough truth that his voice would carry conviction, but held back the one truth that mattered. He knew exactly where Lyra was. Chen was quiet after he finished. "Mr. Morrison, you should have called us immediately. But I understand why you didn't. If Lyra contacts you again, we can offer protective custody. We're building a case, but we need a witness willing to testify before the Integration Council." "She won't come back," Jake said. "She's too afraid." "And honestly, I don't blame her." "Neither do I," Chun admitted. "Stay safe, Mr. Morrison. And if you hear anything about the other missing workers, call me. Day or night." Jake ended the call and returned to the cellar, where Lyra had fallen asleep again, her breathing easier now. He sat in the darkness, listening to the sound of her alien breath, and wondered how his life had changed so completely in just 24 hours. Tomorrow, they would start hunting for the network. Tomorrow, they would begin the impossible task of bringing down a corrupt sheriff protected by interstellar treaty. But tonight, in this moment, Jake allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. The network found them before they found it. 3 days after the translator removal, Jake was in town buying supplies when he felt someone watching him. He turned to find a young Meridian standing near his truck, her skin a lighter blue than Lyra's, her eyes darting nervously between Jake and the street. She pressed something into his hand, a piece of paper, folded small, and whispered through her translator, "Midnight, Red Rock Canyon. Come alone." "They know about Lyra." Before Jake could respond, she vanished into the crowd. Back at the ranch, Jake showed Lyra the paper. Unfolded, it contained coordinates and a single phrase written in what Lyra identified as Meridian script. She wrote the translation: "The voiceless speak loudest." At midnight, Jake drove to Red Rock Canyon, his truck's headlights cutting through the desert darkness. The coordinates led him to a formation of ancient sandstone, weathered into organic curves by millennia of wind. He parked and waited, his hand resting on the rifle he'd brought, hoping he wouldn't need it. They emerged from the rocks like ghost 7 Meridians, all wearing the plain uniforms of domestic workers, all moving with the cautious grace of prey animals. The young woman from town stepped forward, her translator active. "You are Jake Morrison. You hide Lyra 743. We need to know, are you with us, or are you another human who will betray us for tree compliance?" Jake spread his hands, showing he was unarmed. "I'm with you. Lyra's safe. She told me about the others, about Kale's facility. I want to help stop it." An older Meridian moved forward, his skin crossed with scars that glowed faintly. "Words are easy," Human. Sheriff Cale has eyes everywhere. How do we know you're not reporting back to him? Some humans are paid to inform on sympathizers. It was a fair question. Jake pulled out his phone and showed them the call log, his conversations with Agent Chun, his deleted messages, his search history filled with queries about meridian physiology and treaty law. "I'm already committed," he said. "I've got a federal agent watching me and a sheriff who wants to interrogate me. If I'm going down anyway, I want it to mean something." The old Meridian studied the phone, then nodded slowly. "I am Torn 986. I have worked on Earth for 12 years. In that time, I have watched 43 workers disappear. 14 from this region, 29 from others. All taken by Sheriff Cale's network. We have been gathering evidence for 3 years, but we cannot transmit it. The ASO monitors all our communications. We need a human to be our voice." He handed Jake a data chip, small and crystalline. "This contains testimony from 15 workers who survived attempted abductions. It contains intercepted communications, proving Cale's facility exists and showing the transport routes. It contains documentation of treaty violations, evidence that Cale is not rehabilitating workers, but conducting experiments. We need you to give this to Agent Chun, but not yet. First, we need something more." Torn gestured to the youngest of the group, a Meridian who couldn't have been more than the alien equivalent of a teenager. "This is Sierra 215. She worked at the ASO headquarters in Albuquerque before fleeing. She knows the location of Cale's facility and the access codes. But she cannot lead humans there. If she does, the treaty allows Cale to claim she violated security protocols. She will be executed immediately." Jake understood. But if a human discovered it independently, followed Cale's transports, and reported it to federal authorities, then the FIO could claim jurisdiction for investigation. Torn finished. "The treaty has a provision. If human authorities witness alien law enforcement committing crimes against humanity on Earth soil, they can intervene. But they must have undeniable proof, and they must catch Cale in the act." It was a suicide mission, Jake realized. Follow Cale's people to a secret facility, somehow get evidence of what was happening inside, and survive long enough to transmit it to Chun. The odds of success were minimal. The odds of survival were worse. "When's the next transport?" Jake asked. Sierra stepped forward, her translator trembling with her voice. "Tomorrow night. They take workers every new moon. I can tell you the route, the timing, the vehicle designation. But you must understand, if they catch you, we cannot save you. The treaty forbids aliens from interfering with ASO operations. You will face them alone." Jake looked at the 7 Meridians, at their hope-filled eyes, at the scars they bore from a justice system that had become a machine of oppression. He thought about Lyra in his cellar, voiceless but alive. He thought about 43 disappeared workers, their families never knowing what happened. He thought about the choice before him: walk away and live safely, or step forward and possibly die for beings most humans saw as barely better than servants. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory, something the old man had said when Jake was young. "Son, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding that something else matters more than being afraid." "Tell me the route," Jake said. The planning took 2 hours. Sierra drew maps in the dirt, marked timing sequences, explained the security protocols. The transport would leave Albuquerque at 9 p.m., carrying 2 workers who'd been declared fugitives. It would travel north into the Gemmas Mountains, to a facility built into extinct volcanic rock, hidden from satellites by natural thermal interference. Jake would need to follow at a distance, avoid the transport sensors, and find a way inside. "The facility has human construction workers," Torn explained. Cale hired them before his operation began, telling them it was a cultural center. Some are still employed for maintenance. If you can pass as a contractor, you might get inside. It was a thin plan, held together by hope and desperation. But it was a plan, As the Meridians prepared to leave, Sierra approached Jake one more time. Lyra 743 was my orientation guide when I arrived on Earth. She showed me kindness when I was confused and afraid. Please tell her ... her sacrifice mattered. That we will not forget her voice, even though she lost it. Jake promised he would. He drove back to the ranch as dawn broke, the data chip in his pocket, feeling heavier than it should. In the cellar, he found Lyra awake, exercising carefully to rebuild her strength. He told her everything. Her hands moved rapidly, writing on the pad. Too dangerous. They will kill you. Maybe, Jake agreed. But they'll definitely kill more workers if someone doesn't try to stop them. And I'm the only human who knows the truth and has any chance of getting inside. Lyra was quiet for a long time, her stylus hovering over the paper. Finally, she wrote, "Then I'm coming with you." Jake started to protest, but she held up her hand, writing furiously, "I know the facility's layout. I was held there for 6 hours before I escaped. Without me, you'll be lost inside, and I can move more quietly than you. I'm coming. Don't argue." Jake looked at her bandaged throat, at her still healing wounds, at the determination in her amber eyes. He realized arguing would be pointless. Besides, she was right, having someone who knew the facility's interior could mean the difference between success and failure. "Okay," he said. "We do this together. Tomorrow night, we go after Cale." Lyra nodded, and for the first time since he'd found her bleeding in his barn, she smiled. It was a fierce smile, full of anger and hope in equal measure. Tomorrow would bring danger, possibly death. But it would also bring the truth into the light, and sometimes that was worth any risk. The transport was exactly where Sierra said it would be, a black unmarked vehicle moving north on Highway 4 as the sun set behind the Jemez Mountains. Jake followed at a careful distance, his truck's lights off, navigating by the last rays of daylight. Lyra sat beside him, dressed in dark clothes, her movements controlled despite the pain he knew she still felt. They'd spent the day preparing, gathering equipment, reviewing the plan, making contingencies. Jake had written a letter to Agent Chun, sealed it, and given it to Torrin with instructions to deliver it if Jake and Lyra did not return by dawn. The letter contained everything: the data chip's contents, the location of the network, the names of all the workers who testified. If Jake failed tonight, at least the evidence would survive. The transport turned off the highway onto a dirt road that climbed into volcanic badlands. Jake followed, his truck bouncing over rough terrain until the transport disappeared into what looked like solid rock. As they got closer, Jake saw the illusion. A camouflaged entrance, sophisticated enough to fool casual observation, built into the side of an ancient lava flow. Jake parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot with Lyra. The entrance was guarded by 2 Meridian deputies, but their attention was focused inward, watching the transport unload. Jake and Lyra circled around, following Lyra's hand signals, until they found what she'd promised: a ventilation shaft, the same one she'd used to escape. It was barely wide enough for Jake's shoulders, but he squeezed through, army crawling through darkness with Lyra ahead of him. The shaft descended at a steep angle, then opened into a narrow maintenance corridor. Through the grated floor, Jake could see the facility below, and his blood ran cold. The space was massive, carved from volcanic rock, filled with rows of containment cells. Each cell held a meridian, restrained and connected to machinery that pulsed with unnatural light. Some of the prisoners were conscious, their faces twisted in silent agony. Others hung limp in their restraints, their skin flickering erratically. This wasn't a detention center. It was a laboratory. Jake pulled out his phone and started recording, his hands shaking with rage. Lyra pointed down a corridor where Sheriff Cale stood with a human in a white coat, discussing something on a datapad. Jake couldn't hear the words, but he caught fragments through Cale's translator. Neural mapping complete. Personality suppression protocols effective. Treaty ensures no oversight. Double quotes. The human scientist nodded enthusiastically. The Meridian brain is incredibly adaptive. We've successfully reprogrammed 17 subjects to remove individualistic thinking. They're perfect workers, now compliant, efficient, emotionless. Your people's refugee status makes them ideal test subjects, and the treaty means we can operate without interference. Jake felt sick. This wasn't just about silencing witnesses. Cale was conducting mind control experiments, erasing the personalities of workers who showed too much independence, too much humanity. He was creating slaves from refugees and hiding it behind the treaty's protection of alien sovereignty. Lyra tugged Jake's sleeve, pointing urgently. More transports were arriving, visible through the facility's main entrance. This wasn't a routine night. This was something bigger. Cale moved to a central platform, addressing the gathered deputies. Tonight, we expand operations to all integration zones. The Meridian Council on the Homeworld has approved Phase 2. Human authorities will not intervene. They've been convinced this is internal discipline, necessary for integration success. By dawn, we will have processed 40 more workers. By the end of the month, we will have eliminated all voices of dissent among our people on Earth. Jake's recording captured everything: Cale's admission, the facility's scope, the prisoners in their cells. But they needed more. They needed proof that would force action, evidence so damning that even the treaty couldn't shield it. Lyra was writing frantically on a small pad she'd brought. Main server room. 2 levels down. All records stored there. We download everything. Then we run. They move through the maintenance corridors, Lyra navigating from memory despite the darkness. Every sound made Jake's heart hammer. The echo of boots on metal, the hum of machinery, the occasional cry from the cells below. They descended through access shafts, Lyra's movements spider-quick, Jake struggling to keep up with his larger frame. The server room was behind a locked door with a biometric scanner. Lyra examined it, then pointed to her own throat, to the scar where her translator had been. She gestured. The scanner read Meridian biosignatures. She could open it, but using her biometrics would alert security immediately. They would have minutes, maybe less. Jake nodded. They had no choice. Lyra pressed her hand to the scanner. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and alarms immediately began wailing throughout the facility. They were inside a room filled with alien technology, crystalline data cores pulsing with light. Lyra moved to a central terminal, her fingers flying over controls that looked nothing like human keyboards. Data began streaming to a portable drive. She'd connected files, videos, communications, everything. Outside, boots thundered in the corridors. Shouted orders in Meridian echoed off the walls. Jake positioned himself at the door, his rifle raised. He'd promised himself he wouldn't shoot unless absolutely necessary. But looking at those cells, at the victims of Cale's experiments, he wasn't sure that promise would hold. The first deputy rounded the corner, weapon raised. Jake fired a warning shot that sparked off the wall. The deputy retreated, shouting into his communicator. More would come, better armed, better prepared. Lyra's hand touched Jake's shoulder. The download was complete. But the door they'd entered through was now blocked by Cale's forces. They were trapped. Lyra pointed upward to another ventilation shaft, smaller than the first. They could fit, but barely. Jake boosted Lyra up first, then hauled himself into the shaft just as energy blasts tore through the server room, destroying the terminal they'd used. Cale's voice echoed behind them. Seal all exits. They cannot leave with that data. The shaft was a maze, branching in multiple directions. Lyra led them upward, always upward, toward the surface. Behind them, Jake could hear pursuit smaller deputies who could navigate the shafts easier than he could. His shoulders scraped against metal, his lungs burning as he pushed himself forward. They emerged into the main facility. but not where they'd entered. They were in the cell block, surrounded by imprisoned Meridians who stared at them with hollow eyes. Lyra froze, looking at faces she recognized, workers she'd known, now broken, their personalities erased by Cale's experiments. One prisoner lifted his head, and Jake saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. The prisoner's translator crackled. "Run, tell them. We were people, Then the light faded from his eyes again, consciousness slipping back into whatever nightmare Cale's machines had created. Lyra's hands clenched into fists, her whole body trembling with rage and grief. Jake pulled her toward an emergency exit he'd spotted, but Cale's voice stopped them cold. "You cannot win this, human." The sheriff stood at the entrance to the cell block, flanked by 6 armed deputies. "Even if you escape, the treaty protects what happens here. No human court can touch me. No human law applies to how we manage our own people." Jake kept his rifle trained on Cale but didn't fire. "You're wrong. Agent Chan is waiting for my signal. Federal authorities are already mobilizing. And that data chip in my pocket, it's streaming everything to a dozen human rights organizations right now. The whole world is watching. It was a bluff. The chip wasn't transmitting. Couldn't transmit from underground. But Cale didn't know that." Doubt flickered across his face. "You're lying. Our scanners would detect the transmission." "Try me," Jake said. "In about 30 seconds, this facility is going to be surrounded by federal agents. You can kill us, but you can't stop what's already in motion." Cale's hand moved to his weapon, but one of his deputies stepped forward, speaking rapidly in Meridian. Jake couldn't understand the words, but he understood the deputy's body language: uncertainty, fear. The deputy was pointing to a monitor showing external sensors. Cale's face darkened. Human vehicles, multiple, approaching from the south. Jake's heart leaped. It wasn't possible, unless Torn hadn't waited until dawn. Unless the network had been watching, ready to call in reinforcements the moment things went wrong. The rumble of vehicles became audible even underground. Voices echoed from the facility entrance, human voices, speaking English, demanding entry under federal authority. "Agent Chun!" Jake shouted toward the entrance. "Down here, prisoners and evidence." Cale raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Jake's chest. "You have destroyed everything. Years of work. The future of Meridian integration. For what? These workers were failed experiments, useless to their own people. We gave them purpose. You gave them torture," Jake said quietly, "and called it law." For a moment, Jake thought Cale would fire. The alien's finger tightened on the trigger. But then Lyra stepped between them, unarmed, voiceless, but unafraid. She stared at Cale with such fierce defiance that the sheriff hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Federal agents poured into the facility, weapons drawn, voices commanding everyone to stand down. Agent Chun was among them, her face pale as she took in the rows of cells, the experimental equipment, the imprisoned Meridians. "Sheriff Cale," she said, her voice shaking with controlled fury. "You and your deputies are under arrest for crimes against humanity, illegal experimentation, and treaty violations. You have the right to—" "You have no authority here," Cale interrupted. "The treaty is clear. This is alien jurisdiction." Chan pulled out a tablet showing it to Cale. "The treaty has an override clause for genocide. The Meridian Council on your homeworld just revoked your authority 30 minutes ago. They've been investigating you for 2 years, waiting for proof. This human gave it to them." She looked at Jake. "Your data upload? It didn't just go to human organizations. Torin knew someone on the Meridian High Council. They've been watching this facility through your phone's camera for the last hour. Your own people have disavowed you, Sheriff." The color drained from Cale's face, or whatever the Meridian equivalent was. His skin flickered, the light beneath it dimming. His weapon lowered. Federal agents moved in, restraining Cale and his deputies. Others began the careful process of freeing the prisoners, calling for medical teams, documenting everything. Chun approached Jake and Lyra. You both should be in custody too. You broke about 40 federal laws getting this evidence. I know, Jake said. Chen was quiet for a moment, then shook her head. But you also saved lives and exposed a nightmare that was operating right under our noses. The Meridian Council is requesting clemency for both of you. And honestly, I'm recommending it. What you did was illegal as hell, but it was also necessary. She looked at Lyra, at her bandaged throat. You're the one who escaped. The one who started all this. Lyra nodded, unable to speak. Chun's expression softened. There are Meridian medical teams coming from the homeworld. They can repair your translator, restore your voice. It won't be quick, but it's possible. You don't have to be silent forever. Tears streamed down Lyra's face. Jake took her hand, squeezing gently. Over the next hours, the facility was dismantled. 43 prisoners were freed. 43 souls that Cale had claimed were lost. Some were damaged beyond quick repair, their minds fractured by the experiments. But they were alive, and they would heal. The human scientist was arrested, his research seized. The conspiracy reached deeper than anyone had imagined. Corrupted officials on both sides, humans and Meridians who'd profited from the suffering of refugees. But it was over now. Broken, but over. As dawn broke over the Jenna's mountains, Jake and Lyra stood outside the facility, watching the sun paint the volcanic rock in shades of gold and red. Lyra was writing on her pad, showing Jake, "Thank you for seeing me when I needed to be seen." Jake smiled tiredly. You saved yourself. You ran to safety when others would have given up. I just helped you finish the run. Lyra wrote again. What happens now? To us? It was a good question. Jake thought about his quiet ranch, his simple life that would never be simple again. He thought about the network of Meridian workers who'd risked everything to gather evidence. He thought about the long road ahead, trials, reforms, healing. Now, he said, now we make sure it meant something. We testify. We help rebuild. We make sure no one forgets what happened here, so it never happens again. Lyra nodded, then wrote one more thing. Together? Jake looked at this alien being who'd become something he hadn't expected. A friend, a partner in something larger than both of them. He thought about the invisible lines that divided people, the treaties and laws that sometimes protected and sometimes imprisoned, and how sometimes the most important choice was simply to see someone else's humanity, whatever form it took. Yeah, Jake said. Together. In the distance, transport ships from the Meridian homeworld were descending, sent to take charge of the rescued prisoners and ensure justice was done properly this time. The integration treaty would be rewritten, its loopholes closed, its protections strengthened for those who needed them most. Sheriff Cale sat in federal custody. His empire of cruelty collapsed. The 14 missing workers had become 43 found souls. And in the storm cellar on a New Mexico ranch, the blood stains were already fading, but the memory of what began there would endure. Jake Morrison had spent 43 years keeping his head down, following rules, staying safe. But sometimes, safety wasn't the highest virtue. Sometimes, courage meant looking at an injured being in your barn and deciding that laws were written by people, and people could be wrong. It meant choosing compassion over compliance, justice over jurisdiction, humanity over treaties written in alien languages and human legalese. As federal agents led Cale past them toward a transport, the former sheriff stopped, staring at Jake with eyes filled with hatred and something else incomprehension. Why? Cale asked. She was nothing to you, just a worker. Why risk everything? Jake met his gaze steadily. Because that's exactly what you wanted me to think, that she was just anything. But there's no just when you're talking about someone's life. Cale was dragged away, and Jake turned back to Lyra, who was watching the sunrise with an expression of wonder, as if seeing Earth's star for the first time without fear shadowing it. The cowboy and the voiceless alien stood together while the world changed around them. Proof that sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply refusing to look away when someone needed help. And in that refusal, in that small moment of defiance against systems built to divide and dehumanize, they had sparked something that would reshape two worlds' understanding of justice, dignity, and what it truly meant to be civilized. The story that began in blood and terror ended in sunrise and hope. Not a perfect ending. The scars remained. The healing would take time, but an honest one. And sometimes, honesty was the bravest thing of all.